came out early to get a feel for Phoenix and the ambience, and we had a splendid time. And then these 2 days, first at Veritas and then out here. And we've been very pleased with what we've seen. We've been immensely impressed with what we've witnessed in the classroom. I am now sending students regularly to the Weight Arts programs in San Antonio and in Irving. But I discovered to my delight, I have a student from Baylor whom I did not know to be teaching at Veritas, and then another who teaches at Lincoln. So it's been kind of kind of homecoming week. But my first and great passion is Flannery O'Connor. I encountered her my junior year in college, 1962, senior year in college, 1962, when she made her only Texas visit at the invitation of my professor at a small, undistinguished state college. But who, when I didn't meet her, I was too shy. I wasn't about to walk up and glad hand this woman and whom I stood, but in whose presence I stood with such great awe, when I saw that she was about something absolutely important, absolutely funny, and not least of all, about my own region, not the high-class South, the Faulkner, the plantation culture, but the low-class redneck South, which I am a part of. And those three things put together made me see if I could fathom this woman's work and spend my life trying to teach texts like hers, I'd have my vocation. Sure enough, it's been true. So I'm here today because this was began in 1962. It just takes one event to transform a life. I am not wedded to the holy PowerPoint. George Will says it has killed public speaking in America. I don't do bullet point lectures, but visual images do help. So I wanted to get some images of O'Connor and O'Connor's world, and then I'll talk about her life a bit, and we'll look at the story itself. That program okay? So her years, of course, are very brief. She dies at age 39 of disseminated lupus. She spends the last 14 years of her life dying. She comes down with lupus in 1950 and is forced to come back home to Georgia, much to her displeasure. She wanted to write about the South, but she said not to live in the South. Because she was from a small Georgia town called Milledgeville, small city, about 10,000, 15. But she did not want to be smothered by the expectations of her very small-minded, small-town culture. Her mother wanted her to be a belle. She wanted her to be the belle of the ball. Flannery O'Connor had no interest in that. She did not want to be a cheerleader. By the time she was 16, she already announced to a local newspaper editor who had interviewed her, she graduates at 16 high school, what her life ambition was. She said, I want to be a prose satirist. A fairly sophisticated notion of what you want to be at age 16. And so she set her face like flint toward that end, and let's see some pictures of how she arrived. This, I didn't skip it. Is there any way I can forward that without leaning over and blocking it?
Well, do you have?
Just
I'll
move the
move
whole
it
thing.
over.
And then you can, there you go.
That's
Put
okay.
it down here maybe. Then you can put this there.
Thank you.
Oh, this is mine.
Back up.
This is,
Go back. Oh,
on this
okay.
one? Yeah, okay. This is a picture of O'Connor in her mature years. You can see she has striking eyes. You can't tell it here, but striking blue eyes. She has a direct gaze. She is always modestly dressed. She has always either a modest string of pearls or a modest necklace such as this. This would be when she is about 30, early 30s. She grows up in this home, in antebellum home, in Milledgeville, because Milledgeville was, for a time, the capital of Georgia. And so Grant, on his merciless march to Sherman, on his merciless march to the sea, burning everything in front of him, spared Milledgeville on the grounds that they would feed, house, and supply his troops. And so Milledgeville is a perfectly preserved antebellum town. If you want to see a real antebellum southern city, go to Milledgeville, not Atlanta. Atlanta was burned. It's a large house. It's next to what was the governor's mansion. But as large as it is, it has no downstairs bedrooms. So that when she comes down with lupus, is walking on crutches, cannot navigate stairs, she will not be able to come back to this house. But in growing up in this home, already showing her independence of her mother, she said, the chief function at my mama's tea parties is to cover the stain on the sofa. She was never a hail woman well met. She always held the madding crowd off at a certain distance, not in contempt, not in a kind of arrogant disdain, but because she did not want to submit herself to their kinds of performance. She was not baptized in this church. She actually was born in Savannah, Georgia. The family moves to Milledgeville, but she spends her teenage years in the Church of the Immaculate Conception, of the Sacred Heart here in Milledgeville, very modest Catholic church. Not many Catholics in Milledgeville. And the reason her family has to move from Savannah to Milledgeville is her father comes down with lupus. And of course, at that time, it was not known that lupus is often genetically transferred. And the great pity of it is you discover that you have lupus often after you've already fathered children. And of course, I didn't know that then, that she would inherit at least the genetic predisposition to lupus. And so this is where she worships, both as a young teenager and then when she comes back in the last 14 years of her life. This is the red clay that you read a lot about in O'Connor's stories. This is the red clay road that leads up to the house, the farmhouse where she lived her last 14 years. It has a rather pretentious name, Andalusia, given to it by previous owners. O'Connors were not pretentious at all. It's a plain farmhouse from the early part of the 20th century. It has a kind of stark, austere beauty here. You see its octagonal shape here. This is O'Connor on crutches, along with a distinguished visiting Catholic theologian with the hands showing. Her confessor was a man named James McCown, who I think was a friend of your grandmother. I'm not sure about this, I think so. But note very well, this is O'Connor's stance. She is going to be the tallest person in the picture, even though she, in fact, is the shortest person on the scene, by standing not on the first step, but on the second step. She was a smother mother, let's be honest about it. She wanted to manage Flannery O'Connor's life, and O'Connor did not want her life to be managed by her mother. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's why it was so painful for her to return home. These are the outbuildings. This is the house where the various farm workers live, sometimes black, sometimes white. So when you think of the black characters in today's story, think of a place like this, never seen a lick of paint. Sometimes it was occupied by refugee families that had been brought into the local Catholic community. And in one of her stories, if you don't know it, I urge you to know it. It features a Polish immigrant family. And I've seen in that house, it's now been recovered, the box with which this family brought all of its worldly goods in from Poland as refugees coming to live in this house. O'Connor said she loved the art of poach sitting. She said, I spend my mornings writing and my afternoons recovering. And she did so by writing, by sitting on her front porch, screened in, because as you know, in the South, mosquitoes will eat you alive unless you have a screen. This is adult students I taught in the 70s who made a trip down to Millersville, sitting on the front porch. This is what O'Connor would have seen. Now it's grown up quite a bit, but then it looks down upon this small lake where Muscovy ducks and geese and other fowl were home, were kept. And O'Connor said something about this that is worth repeating. She says, "I can see more from my Georgia front porch than from any European tour." I talked with a young man today at lunch who's never lived anywhere but Arizona. He has no desire to live anywhere but Arizona. And I congratulated him on that. She really worried about the mobility of American society, where people pick up and move and don't ever develop any life anywhere. Because she says that the place where you stay somewhere for a long time, people take the measure of you. You can't fake them. And they in turn, you in turn take the measure of them. You hold each other accountable because you're a part of a single, especially smaller town community. When one of her friends asked what would be her preferred place for an aspiring writer to come and live, would it be New York, San Francisco, or Chicago? She said, this writer was from Alabama. She said, no. She loved that word, no. She said, I'd recommend any Alabama town with a population under 5,000. So she liked the local scene, the limited scene. Limits for Flannery O'Connor are freeing. Our culture has it backwards. Wants no limits. To have no limits is to be imprisoned in pure possibility. Her hobby was raising peafowl, notice the plural. She has a magnificent essay. I saw the O'Connor collected works somewhere. Yeah, be sure and read that story. For her, peacocks were a virtually mystic bird. They have very powerful resonance in the East, Japan, for example, but also in the West. But from the rear, they're actually quite ugly. In this case, of course, this is the peacock trying to attract the peahen, and at this point he's unsuccessful, much I'm sure to his dismay, but when he turns, he is something magnificent. Those feathers on these long, what I guess we'll call fronds, are about 6 feet. Those fronds are about 6 feet long. And the peacock is famed primarily for these eyes that are in the center of every peacock feather tail. And the eyes are often compared to the bursting of 1,000 suns that occurs in the book of Revelation. And so for O'Connor, it's an apocalyptic bird, a bird that represents the final consummation of all things. And if you've ever heard one cry, you understand why it's apocalyptic. Anybody heard a peacock cry? It's remarkable. My first trip with Suzanne down there, we stayed in a Holiday Inn across from the Andalusia, air-conditioned, cement block walls, no windows, no way for sound to get in. We were awakened at 2 a.m. by peacocks screaming. He's still quite a lordly bird as he drags his tail behind him. And the peafowl is quite a lovely creature with her wonderful little tuft. You can't quite see it here, but she has these little feathers coming out the top. This was O'Connor's burro, named Ernest, probably after she had read Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. She loved exotic animals. She would not want a horse. She wanted a burro. She finishes high school at 16 there in Millersville. She stays on to go to the local college, Georgia State College for Women, not a distinguished school, because the O'Connors were too poor. They moved back to Millersville because they had property there. The father is dying of lupus. He can't support them with he was a real estate dealer, so they can't send her off to some snippy school. She goes to the local state college. So I'm going to prepare you for a question that will appear in the story Revelation. She switches her major from English, where she thought she would find her natural home, as a future writer to the social sciences. They were still diagramming sentences as in English courses at the State College. She switches her major to social science, and then she says at the end of her 4 years, I will not explain this, we'll come to the story to explain it. Thank God my social science major didn't take. It was like an inoculation that didn't work. Think about that. Think about the book that Mary Grace is reading. Think about its title. So she wins a scholarship to the University of Iowa to its journalism school because she didn't have recommendations from the English profs that could get her into the creative writing program. But she's been editor of the school magazine. She's a very fine cartoonist. You should see her cartoons. They're really wickedly funny. She has a kind of Mark Twain slam bang humor. It's not subtle. Where, for example, two fish are arguing and one's saying, oh, why don't you go jump out of the lake? And then the best one is the senior prom showing the lovely dames and the belles of the ball swirling across the floor with their formals, the gents in their tuxes, and over in one corner, a cowing, unhappy-looking, fierce, unaccompanied female, like Flannery herself, saying, oh, well, I can always be a PhD. So I tell my students, if you want to understand your teachers, remember they're the people nobody wanted to dance with in high school. I am the chief. I still can't dance, my wife's fine dancer. So she goes off to the University of Iowa, starts out her first semester in journalism, and absolutely hates it, despises it, can't stand the idea of doing a full 2-year degree. So she goes over to the office of a man named Paul Engel, who's director of the Creative Writing Workshop at Iowa, world famous, the best creative writing program in the nation at that time, and petitions to get into his school. And he said, what are your qualifications? She said, I know how to write. And he admitted her. She won all of their awards. When they would have visiting artists and professors come in, without fail, they would ask O'Connor's story to be read. She was the star of the whole show. She loved Iowa, didn't mind the fierce winters, and so you see her here dressed for the cold. Here she is after she's published one of her first books, the book signing. This is probably for Wise Blood, published in see, this is Wise Blood, published in 1952. You can see still a lovely woman. Here she is a little bit later, big broad smile. Here you see the very modest pearl necklace under the neckline. So she comes back here to this farm home, as I say, in 1950, after growing horribly ill on a train return trip from Connecticut, because she had met Sally and Robert Fitzgerald, who became her literary editors. Again, I'm sure your grandmother is a friend of theirs, because they were very much tied to the National Librarians and so forth. And she had noticed that during the retyping of Wise Blood manuscripts, which she never had anything like an electric typewriter, but she did have an electric typewriter at the end, that she would just grow unbelievably weary. She couldn't work but a few minutes and then exhaustion. She was immediately clapped into the Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta. They knew this woman was seriously ill, not far from death. And after extensive exploration, it was discovered that she had inherited her father's disease, that she is going to die of this incurable illness, lupus erythematosus. And so she said, I was hog-tied in the idea of having to come back home and live, as she thought, under my mama's thumb. I can give you one anecdote that I think explains a good deal about Mrs. O'Connor, whom I didn't get to meet at the time. I took students to know this book. It comes from my Catholic professor at East Texas State, who brought O'Connor to commerce and enabled my whole life to be changed by her. He went to visit the O'Connors at her invitation, and O'Connor was a devout Catholic. She tried to receive the sacrament every day, and on days when she couldn't, she would go to the service of benediction, which is a service of sheer adoration, where you don't actually take the sacrament. And she said, we're going to the service of benediction, would you like to go with us? Assuming being Catholic, he probably said, sure, let's go. Well, O'Connor was a typical pointy-headed intellectual who couldn't park a bicycle straight, as George Wallace famously said, never learned to drive. So Mrs. O'Connor drives them into Milledgeville. She lets them out in front of a Sacred Heart Church for them to enter, and he assumes for her to go park in the rear, and instead, Mrs. O'Connor says, y'all go pray while I get the groceries. In other words, you do something irrelevant while I do something important. So she was an utterly practical woman. She had no deep religious sensibilities. O'Connor said, the reason I write short stories is so my mama won't have a very long time to take into reading them. She'd rather be in the garden digging than reading my stuff. And when she published these stories that are so grotesque it almost turned poor Mel away from them forever, they would say to her, why don't you write about people that are nice? And of course, niceness is for